Good morning and welcome to the New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity. At this time, can everyone please silence your cell phones? If you wish to testify, please go up to the sergeant's desk to fill out a testimony slip. Written testimony can be emailed to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Councilmember Tiffany Caban. My pronouns are she, her, Chair of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity. Today, the committee will hold a hearing on the NGBV Home Plus program, as well as two pieces of legislation. Introduction number 534A, sponsored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, related to establishing a program to assist with changing door locks on the dwellings of survivors of domestic and gender-based violence, and resolution number 475, sponsored by Councilmember Amanda Farias, calling on the New York State Legislature to pass and for the governor to sign legislation to create a purple alert system for missing victims of domestic violence. This is the committee's fourth hearing related to domestic and gender-based violence this session. As I stated in our February 2022 hearing on barriers to services, it is our duty to be proactive about survivor services. Housing instability is one of the largest barriers. And for example, domestic violence is one of the leading causes of housing and homelessness for women and their children. The Home Plus program addresses this need by providing free and confidential security resources to survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence who want to stay in their homes instead of entering a shelter or going somewhere else. This includes personal alarm systems that can be used to alert others of a crisis within the home, and as of last October, lock, door, and window repair and replacement services free of charge. I look forward to discussing the Home Plus program expansion at today's hearing and learning more about how the council can support survivors. Before going further, I'd like to pause for a moment to recognize colleagues who have joined. I think we have virtually Council Member, who do we have with us? Gennaro, and I think we'll be welcoming Councilmember Hanif shortly to provide brief remarks on the legislation. So I think we'll just hold for a minute. All right, maybe we'll do the testimony and we'll provide an opportunity for her to give remarks a little bit later. So I'd also like to thank my staff and committee staff for their work in preparing today's hearing. Madhuri Shukla, my legislative and budget director, Brenda McKinney, the committee's senior legislative counsel, and Astrid Chan, the committee's new financial analyst. And now I will hand it over to committee counsel, Brenda, to address some housekeeping items, read the oath before we begin with the administration's testimony.
Thank you so much, Chair. First, as a reminder, today is an in-person hearing with the option of virtual testimony for the public. The committees will be accepting registrations for testimony throughout the hearing. Anyone who is attending in person and who wishes to testify in person should see the Sergeant at Arms to fill out a witness slip, even if you registered in advance online. As usual, we will begin today's hearing with testimony for the administration, followed by council member question and answers, and then moving to public testimony. We will be limiting council member question and answer, including comments, to 5 minutes. During the public testimony portion of the hearing, witnesses from the public will be limited to 3 minutes. Depending on the number of witnesses and members, we may also not be using a clock. As a reminder to all of our witnesses, please state your name prior to your testimony for the record. The committees will also be accepting written testimony for up to 72 hours after the hearing. So with this, we will administer the affirmation to the witnesses from the administration who may begin their testimony. If you may please raise your right hand. Today we have Salani Sethi, First Deputy Commissioner from NGBV, and Jamal Asaraj, Director of Special Projects from NGBV. Apologies for any mispronunciation. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions today?
I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you so much. At this point, the administration may begin your testimony. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Kaban and members of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity. I'm Saloni Sethi, First Deputy Commissioner of the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, or NGBV, and I'm joined by Jamal Al-Sarraj, NGBV's Director of Special Projects. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about NGBV's Home Plus program and INT 534A. NGBV directly manages a contract portfolio of prevention and intervention programming, builds capacity for agency staff and community members to identify and respond to domestic and gender-based violence, or DVGBV, through outreach and training, and develops policies and best practices to strengthen the city's approaches to these issues. We collaborate with city agencies, over 100 nonprofit providers, community stakeholders, and people with lived experience to reduce barriers and ensure access to inclusive services for survivors of DVGBV. This includes services like Home Plus. Home Plus is a citywide program that helps survivors to safely stay in their homes as an alternative to relocating or seeking shelter placement. In 2021, Home Plus replaced and expanded upon the Human Resource Administration's Alternative to Shelter program. Like the Alternative to Shelter program, Home Plus provides survivors with free personal alarm systems, but its services also include safety planning and case management to support survivors' safety in their homes, locksmith services, and referrals to ancillary services as needed. Home Plus has minimal barriers to eligibility. All services are free, and to participate, an individual only needs to identify as a survivor of domestic or gender-based violence and live in New York City. The program does not require any documentation of survivorship, such as police reports or orders of protection. Currently, NGBV contracts with 5 community-based providers, 1 in each borough, to implement Home Plus. We partner with the Violence Intervention Program in the Bronx, Help Roads in Brooklyn, Rising Ground Steps to End Family Violence in Manhattan, Womankind in Queens, and the Seaman Society for Children and Families in Staten Island. These organizations were chosen because they have extensive experience providing culturally specific domestic violence services to diverse populations. To obtain Home Plus services, survivors can connect directly with the Home Plus provider in their borough or obtain a referral through an organization or program they're already working with. The Home Plus personal alarm system is comprised of a base unit and a portable pendant. Once a survivor has completed the intake process with the Home Plus provider and chooses to receive an alarm system, the Home Plus provider will discuss safety concerns and risks with the survivor and establish who they would like to be notified in case of an alarm activation. This can be 1 or more people or agencies, including law enforcement, trusted friends or family members, or a service provider. This information is kept confidential and transmitted to our alarm system vendor. Our alarm system vendor will ship an alarm system to the survivor's address, typically within 2 to 3 business days. The alarm system arrives with instructions for self-installation, including a phone number for assistance. The alarm system vendor will also attempt to reach the Home Plus client shortly after the expected delivery to support them through the self-installation and answer any questions. If the survivor has difficulty with self-installation, they can also request an in-person installation by a technician. A survivor can activate their alarm by pressing a button on the portable pendant. Once the alarm is activated, staff from the Emergency Response Center will attempt to verify if the activation was intentional or accidental by communicating with the survivor through the alarm system's base unit or via call or text if that is the client's preference. The Emergency Response Center will also notify the survivor's designated contacts. Home Plus locksmith services provide survivors with door and window lock changes or repairs to help survivors safely remain in their homes. Once a survivor completes an intake with a Home Plus provider and chooses to receive locksmith services, our lock change vendor will schedule an appointment with the survivor to come to their home, assess the extent of the job required, and either complete the job or set up an appointment to return if additional equipment, such as a new door, is necessary. For standard locks, the repair or replacement work is typically completed within a single visit. Home Plus can facilitate 24-hour door lock replacement for basic locks when needed. In addition to the locksmith and personal alarm system services, Home Plus coordinators can connect survivors of DVGBV with a wide range of support and assistance, such as safety planning, case management, and referral to services to other specialized domestic violence service organizations, including those at NGBV's Family Justice Centers. The goal is to provide comprehensive support to survivors and help them remain safely in their homes. Since the launch of Home Plus Personal Alarm System program in October 2021, Home Plus providers have received 648 requests for security pendants. Since the launch of Home Plus Lock Change program in the fall of 2022, Home Plus providers have received 62 requests for locksmith services. An evaluation of the Home Plus program is being conducted in partnership with graduate students at NYU's Wagner School of Public Service. The evaluation is currently underway and is expected to be completed by May 2023. Regarding INT 534A, NGBV thanks Councilmember Hanif and her legislative team for their commitment to survivors and their partnership in drafting bill language that aligns with our office's current efforts to help survivors maintain safe and secure housing. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with the Council, our sister city agencies, and our community-based providers to better meet the home security needs of survivors. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, and I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we have been joined by Council Members Stevens and Gutierrez. And we can start with questions. We're good to start with questions, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you again for your testimony. I'd like to start just by asking, what are the city's biggest challenges in responding to issues surrounding housing instability for survivors of domestic and gender-based violence, especially those who want to stay in their homes instead of entering shelter or going somewhere else? I know that you mentioned that in your testimony, but if you could go into that into further detail.
Sure. I mean, I think, as with many people in the city, housing in general is a challenge, and maintaining safe and affordable housing continues to be a challenge throughout the city. I think for survivors in particular, one of the things that we see is that they often leave housing purely for safety reasons, right? And I think that's where we're thinking about programs like Home Plus, where if we can keep survivors safely in their homes, we can avoid one major reason that survivors are leaving housing that was otherwise affordable and maintainable.
And if I could just ask you to flesh out a little bit more there, I understand the very, the very real challenge that we face as New Yorkers in terms of just maintaining a place. But what are some of the other reasons why a survivor, in addition to finances, might want to stay in the home they're currently in?
I mean, again, a lot of survivors, especially, for instance, survivors, with children, they may want to stay in their community because the school is closed. They may have family in their community. They may have other supports, right? And I think one of the critical things for survivors that we know that happens when they relocate to shelter is they lose a lot of those supports that they have within community, and this is one way to ensure that they're keeping the people that support them through their experience close to them.
Thank you. And at this committee's December 2022 hearing on coerced debt, we heard about NGBV's work with over 100 nonprofit providers and community stakeholders, including but not limited to through the city's Family Justice Centers, and offering initiatives and programs that to support survivors. Other than the Home Plus program, what programs are focused on housing stability, and in what ways are they focused on housing stability?
Sure. I mean, so I think, most of our partner orgs all do housing work and housing stability work in some way, shape, or form. I think in addition to that, recently we've had a lot of success with working with the Emergency Housing Voucher, the EHV program, and connecting survivors in community to homes through that program. And I think the other sort of program that I'll mention that is sort of new that we're working on launching is we're working on a microgrant flexible funding program that again provides survivors with low barrier grants to meet whatever need that they have that would allow them to stay safely at home.
Thank you. And how would the Home Plus program work with or complement the similar programs that you just talked about that might exist, and then also expanding, including similar programs like Safe Horizons Project SAFE, for example?
Sure. So I think, in general, our goal is to make sure that what we're offering to survivors is as comprehensive a set of services as possible, right? So I think when it comes to Home Plus or a microgrant program or EHV or Safe Horizons Project SAFE, one of the things that our office is committed to doing is making sure that we're communicating with all of our partners and ensuring that there's cross-referral, right? So if there's a program that meets, need X of a survivor, and there's another program that meets need Y, we can make sure that the survivor is connected to both. And none of the programs are exclusionary, right? So a survivor could get services through could get a voucher through EHV and then get services through Home Plus and potentially get a microgrant later on, right? There's no sort of barriers in terms of how many services a survivor can receive.
That's great, thank you. And what agencies and offices, other than those present at today's hearing, are working on this issue?
So, you mean broadly in terms of housing stability or in terms of Home Plus in particular?
I guess maybe a little bit of both. I think, broadly in the context of the intersection of domestic violence, gender-based violence, and housing instability.
Yeah, I mean, I think we partner very closely with our colleagues at DSS HRA, right? And they operate the city's sort of non-residential domestic violence services as well as the residential services for DV survivors. So we're always in communication with them to make sure that we're supporting sort of housing stability needs broadly for survivors. And then, with all of our providers, I think we're constantly outreaching and making sure that the information about the programming we're developing is available to them and to the clients that they serve.
So I want to move into asking you a little bit about outreach. Like you talked about the communication and the collaboration, but what outreach is in place surrounding this issue, again, more broadly, the intersection of housing instability or housing precarity and DV and GBV, but then also, more narrowly with the Home Plus program and similar programming.
Yeah, so I mean, with Home Plus in particular, it's we've gone through sort of all of the channels that we usually go through. So we've doing press releases when we're adding new services into the program. We have information on our website about the services. We're working to incorporate this into NYC Hope, which is our portal for survivors for resources. We also conduct regular meetings with our providers to kind of talk about the program, get the word out there. People can connect to the program through our family justice centers. They can connect through the domestic violence hotline, the city's 24-hour hotline. So, we're trying to make sure that all the touch points that a survivor might connect to, they have the information that they need to make referrals to this program and all of our programs.
And what about folks who are non-English speakers, folks with various disabilities in terms of being able to access the information and also kind of reaching folks beyond the digital divide?
Yeah, so I think in terms of accessibility, like all of our services are accessible language-wise. So all of our providers have access to language line or telephonic interpretation services. In addition, all of the materials for Home Plus and our other programs are translated into the city's top 10 designated languages. We're working again as part of as we're doing the physical printing of our resource guide, we're going to include information about that program, Home Plus, and our other programs in that guide as well. And in terms of accessibility for people with disabilities, I think again that's something that we work very closely on, making sure that all of our programs are accessible to folks that are in terms of Home Plus, especially thinking about folks that are deaf and hard of hearing or may have like low visibility or like visual impairments, and making sure that our alarm systems and services are accessible to those folks as well.
Well, thank you. And the programs that you've mentioned, including Home Plus, how is addressing the issues that they address changed in the last 3 to 5 years? And I think I'm particularly talking about, what kinds of like pandemic necessary adjustments have taken place.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the past 3 to 5 years, I think what's great is that I think the city has been trying new things in terms of addressing the intersection of domestic violence and homelessness, right? And I think some of that has been informed by the pandemic. So, in addition to a program like Home Plus, which is a variation and improvement on a program that the city, or expansion of a program that the city had run for a long time. I think about our flexible funding or microgrant program, which is something that really, we had piloted during COVID as a way of like meeting survivors' immediate financial needs, right? Because I think during the pandemic, everyone realized that those concrete financial needs were so dire, and we had a private foundation give us some funding to meet those needs. And now, based on what we learned through the pandemic and based on that pilot, and we're able to sort of expand that program into an ongoing city-funded program.
Which I'm very excited about that. And actually, just based on that, and I think the sort of piloted micro grant program lasted about 3 months, served well over 100 survivors, I believe. And about how much money was spent during that time period?
It's about $500,000.
About 500 to service those folks over 3 months. So look forward to fighting for a substantially larger amount of that in the budget to stand up the program and meet the needs of folks year round. So I want to just quickly acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Hanif, and probably appropriate. And also invite you to make some remarks.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Caban and the Committee on Women and Gender Equity for holding this important hearing and for including my bill, Intro 534A, on the agenda. I also want to thank the 25 members of the council who sponsor this bill, especially co-prime sponsors, Chair Caban and council members Narcisse, Farias, Lewis, and Riley. When a domestic violence survivor needs to change the locks of their door in order to protect themselves against their abuser, they can be put in the difficult decision of needing to choose between paying for an expensive lock change out of pocket or foregoing the lock change and putting themselves at risk. This dilemma should not be a reality in New York City. No one should fear for their safety because of their economic status. I am grateful that in recent months, NGBV's program Home Plus has begun to address this issue by providing free lock installations and replacements to domestic violence survivors. If passed, Intro 534A will ensure Home Plus becomes a permanent city program and codify key program elements, including providing connections to wraparound services such as counseling, safety planning, housing services, and legal services, not requiring an active order of protection and police response in order to qualify for the program, and lastly, centering the work of trusted community-based organizations. This will set this critical program up for sustained success citywide, together with Chair Caban's Support Survivors legislative package that passed last year. The passage of Intro 534A would create a holistic infrastructure of direct services for domestic violence survivors in our city. I want to thank the advocacy groups and service providers whose insights were essential in shaping this legislation, including the Arab American Family Support Center, Sakhi for South Asian Women, Asiya Women's Center, Jahaji Sisters, Safe Horizon, and New Destiny Housing. I also want to thank the staff who have worked on the bill, Alex Liao, Muslamia, and Nora Brickner from my team, Madhuri Shukla from Chair Caban's team, Nell Beekman from the Council's Legislative Division, and Committee Counsel Brenda McKinney. I also need to extend gratitude to the folks at NGBV who have been incredible proactive partners on this bill, including Melissa Paquette, Yue Chow, First Deputy Commissioner Saloni Sethi, and Commissioner Cecile Noel, as well as Emily Stittleman and Martha Alfaro from the Law Department and Kevin Cho from City Legislative Affairs. I'll now turn it back to Chair Caban.
Well, do you want to ask any questions about your legislation? I'm happy to.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
well,
you.
Go and have at it.
Great. So I know I missed some of the start of the hearing. I'd like to know, does the administration support this legislation? And please share why or why not.
So thank you so much, Councilmember Hanif. We're definitely, in support of this legislation. We think Home Plus is an important program and resource for survivors, and we'd be happy to sort of have it codified as an ongoing program.
That's great. That's wonderful news. We're really grateful to have your partnership in this life-saving policy and to be able to codify what you've already begun. In the past, we've heard from advocates that it can take some legwork to manage the vendors for lock changes. Does NGBV have a list of vendors, or do you do any training to ensure that vendors are trauma-informed and understand the importance of confidentiality in the safety context?
We do. So we have a vendor right now. I would say it's Maximum Security is our current vendor, and I think we work with them to provide training on intimate partner violence and trauma-informed responses. We also ensure that they maintain confidentiality and they get sort of training on that, right? So they sign an NDA, because I think the other piece, in addition to the response, is making sure that the information they have is secure. So we're always trying to pay attention to both of those things.
That's really great. And would a contract for locksmith services cover the cost of labor or any or all costs associated with replacing door locks?
There's no costs to the survivor of the program. We cover all the costs associated.
Great. We've heard from survivors and advocates that survivors sometimes do not feel comfortable speaking with organizations, but will go to a religious center like a mosque for assistance, who in turn help with replacing locks. Would there ever be a possibility for a stipend or reimbursement program as part of Home Plus to support those organizations or centers?
So unfortunately, right now, that's not something that is contemplated by the program.
And is there any effort to expand the program's reach to religious centers, or has that been contemplated?
I think, we're happy to consider that as part of our broader sort of outreach efforts, for sure.
Great. And then what will you do to guarantee same-day lock changes in NYCHA housing? Changes can take days, and at times survivors pay for it themselves out of fear and desperation.
So we have been in communication with NYCHA to sort of discuss how lock changes would work within NYCHA housing, and Home Plus does have the ability to provide lock changes within 24 hours.
Great. And have survivors from NYCHA been a part of the program already, if you can clarify?
I'll defer to Jamal for that one.
Hi, Councilmember Honey.
Nice
To
to
my
see you.
understanding, we'll have to verify that. Off the top of my head, I don't believe we have NYCHA residents who are current clients with the lock change component.
And could you walk me through what a client's relationship with NGB looks like from the beginning to sort of the end, or are they a part of NGB's network for life?
So clients sort of part and parcel with the way we approach providing services to survivors. It's a self-determination around continuing or terminating services in that context. So there's no forced case closure or time in which they have to sort of redo an intake. So walking it through the beginning, a survivor can self-refer or just reach out to any of the organizations that are implementing Home Plus. They can be referred from another organization. They go through an intake process that's a lot about discussing safety and risk. At that point, they become a client and get connected to the specific services that are part of the program. And through regular check-ins with the provider, they come to a decision about if they'd like to continue and they need more services through the program, or if they'd like to stop participating in the program.
Great. How will NGBV ensure transparency of data results 12 months after signing, and how can CBOs and advocates hold stakeholder parties accountable to survivors?
So I think, we always welcome feedback from all of our CBOs and advocates. I think there's, ways to provide feedback on our website in general about our programming, Home Plus being included in that. We're, working on developing sort of an FAQ about the program as well to kind of make sure that there's information and clarity for everybody about what the program does and how best to utilize it, as well as continuing to do outreach and make sure that the information keeps getting out there. In addition, I'll say that, we have on our website information about specific complaints around like language access and accessibility as well. So folks are welcome to, and people can also always call 311 as another option in terms of, giving feedback if need be.
And at this time, are you all holding a stakeholders table where anti-domestic violence organizations are meeting maybe on a regular basis to offer feedback directly, or what does that look like?
So we partner in many existing stakeholder convenings. So for instance, the Downstate Coalition comes to mind that we are regularly at. In addition, we have an advisory council with about 25 different provider orgs on the advisory council that continually meet quarterly and provide feedback on our office and its work, as well as help inform sort of future directions for the office. And then, in addition to that, through the Family Justice Centers, all the partners there, all the providers there are regularly convened through those centers.
Got it. Could I do a few more questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Chair. At present, there's just one required report on the effects of the program required by the legislation rather than annual reporting. Is progress on this program something that the administration might consider tracking in NGBV's annual reports, even if not required by the law?
I think we're definitely open to considering it, and I think as we mentioned in the testimony, we are working with on an evaluation of the program that we anticipate to have completed by May 2023 with
Great.
graduate students at NYU Wagner.
That's wonderful to know. We really look forward to that report. The press releases for the Home Plus program expansion mentions $1 million investments for Home Plus. This is technically not new money, but it has been NGBV's budget since fiscal 2021. Why hasn't this number been adjusted since then, given that inflation has become an issue? And can you provide a budget cost breakdown for the Home Plus program?
Sure. I think, in terms of expanding the number, right now, we haven't currently seen a need in terms of demand and that our providers are able to meet the demand right now with the existing budget. But as with all of our programs, we'll continually sort of review and ask for more as we hear that, from our providers, right? I think that's sort of how that works. And in terms of the breakdown, we have an annual budget, as you said, of $1,666,000. Of that, about $628,000 goes directly to the providers, and the rest goes to the response alert for the personal security devices and the locksmith services.
Could you repeat those last few numbers one more time?
Sure. So I said, it's about $628,000 goes to the providers, and the rest goes to the locksmith and alarm services.
And could you just clarify who are the providers?
For Home Plus?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the providers it's VIP in the Bronx, it's Womankind in Queens, it's Rising Ground Step Stands Family Violence in Manhattan, Siemens Society in Staten Island, and Help Roads in Brooklyn currently.
And so are there other providers who might get instated into the program, or what does that process look like?
Sure. So right now, these contracts, we'll probably renew them through FY24, and our plan is to resolicit through a competitive solicitation after that. So once that happens, anybody who wants to apply can, and it'll be the regular competitive solicitation process for the city.
And then what is the provider tasked with?
So the provider is, tasked with making sure that they have somebody who's a Home Plus coordinator who can, take the incoming referrals, do the assessments of the clients, and the assessments are really focused on what are their needs, what are the services that they want. They communicate with the various vendors in terms of making sure that the client's needs are also communicated to the vendor, right? So if somebody, wants to make sure that the personal security system company only talks to them in Spanish, the provider will let the company know that. And they are responsible for connecting the client to any other services that they may need. So that could be services like legal services, counseling. Providers will do safety planning with all the clients and provide case management really related to staying safe in the home.
Got it. So for an organization right now that is not a provider, what does that mean for them when they have clients who may need lock changes?
They would be encouraged to sort of refer directly to one of the Home Plus providers.
Okay.
And have that client go there and get services there.
So right now, if I'm understanding this correctly, the non-provider organizations know which are the providers.
Yeah, and I think that's part of our ongoing sort of outreach work,
Okay.
right? And I think that's why we want to make sure that folks are aware of the program, because the cross-referral piece is really important.
Great. And then is there a specific time frame for CBOs to render the lock changing services? Both Project SAFE and the city's Home Plus program have varying timelines for their services depending on volume and the availability of third-party vendors, and may not be able to do same-day lock changes with many clients.
Yeah, so I think, for Home Plus, we are able to do 24-hour, lock changes. I think part of that is also on the provider and the assessment with the client and their needs, right? So I think it depends on what that conversation with the client looks like, what the safety plan looks like, and making sure that they get the lock change in the time that they need to maintain their safety.
Great. And then what does eligibility look like for survivors who are still living with the person causing abuse or harm?
So survivors who are still living with their abusive partner are eligible for the program, but again, I think part of that goes to the provider and the conversation they have with the survivors, right? Because I think when you're in that situation, you really need to do a delicate sort of safety assessment and have a conversation with the client about what makes sense and how this might impact their overall safety. Yeah, Jamal can add.
Also wanted to add, in terms of, earlier we had mentioned that their devices, if it's the alarm system, are mailed to the person's address, but they can be mailed to any alternative address that's deemed safe by the client. So if someone lives with their abusive partner, the person causing harm, and in the context of having a device mailed that could escalate risk or danger, it can be arranged that it could be sent somewhere else. So that's just one of several considerations we take into place around your question, Council Member.
Thank you. And then do you all coordinate the alternative mailing address, or how is that sorted out? Is that with the provider? Okay. And then finally, the bill language only covers lock changing services, but mentions additional services. Would the administration potentially also cover door and lock repair?
So currently, Home Plus does cover door and lock repair, as well as sort of window security. So we're trying to make this as comprehensive as possible in terms of meeting a survivor's safety needs.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge the presence of Councilmember Riley, who's joined us. And then I just want to ask one follow-up question before handing it over to another colleague. You talked a little bit about eligibility for survivors who are still living with the person causing harm. Can you talk a little bit about some of the difficulties or how it would be navigated if, in that scenario, a lock change is performed, and the intersection with tenant housing laws around unlawful evictions and things like that?
Yeah, so I think this is where we are working with our providers and have given them some guidance on sort of the conversations they should be having with survivors as they consider this program. So as part of the intake, if that's the situation, a provider would talk to a survivor and make sure that they look at their lease, for instance. Who's on the lease? Are they the only ones on the lease? Is the person causing harm the main leaseholder, right? Because that'll impact what that looks like. I also think this is one of the reasons that we include the referrals to housing attorneys here, because in those kind of thornier cases, we want to make sure that survivor is also connected to legal resources that they need to navigate the situation while maintaining their safety and still being able to access the program if it makes sense.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Councilmember Gutierrez.
Thank you, Chair. I was just talking with my colleague, Councilmember Stevens. This is great. I know it's a relatively new launch since fall 22. So I think my first question is just related to outreach. I know right now it's a small program. It's one CBO in each borough. But I also think that it's important for folks to know about it, and being completely ignorant to the process, right? You want to make sure that you're offering safety and security before you roll out and do any of these things. So is there a plan to expand outreach, to expand the way that New Yorkers understand that this is a program that is potentially accessible to them? Is my first question.
Sure, thanks for the question. I think I said earlier, I think that the outreach is ongoing and perpetual, I think, for us, for all of our programs, right? And I think one of the biggest things that we can do around, domestic and gender-based violence is continually raise awareness of the issue and raise awareness of the resources. And I think, our NGBV has a citywide outreach team that's dedicated to this, as well as Jamal and his team, who do outreach on Home Plus in particular. So we're always open to connecting with anybody that would be interested, to do some kind of presentation about domestic and gender-based violence, as well as the resources available.
Thank you. My next question is just about the process or the protocol in those instances where a victim is connecting with the CBO, has the alarm system set up, is now asking for a lock. Are there instances where building management or the supers will ask for a spare key? What does the safety plan look like in those instances? My building is an example. The building that I grew up is an example of that, where you can change the locks as many times as you want, but they want a copy. And does that compromise the victim's safety? And kind of what is the response that you all have in those instances?
Sure, and I think that's a great question, because I think it is so case by case, right? And I think again, this is why our providers are really encouraged to talk to the survivors about their specific situation, because to your point, it's every landlord may be different, every building may be different, and I think again, it's if they feel safe in that building or with that landlord and safe with them having the key, that's sort of what'll be driving the process as much as possible. So assuming that they feel safe living in the building and the landlord already has a key to the apartment and that feels safe to the survivor, then we'd probably, we can make multiple keys. Our provider is open to making multiple keys to give one to the landlord of the building if need be. If the survivor doesn't feel safe in that building or with the landlord having the key, then that's a separate situation, right? And our providers would sort of assess for that and try and make a safety plan around those needs as well.
Great. So I guess that kind of answers my next question about victims that are maybe perhaps like renting rooms from, from a person. So like they'll have a specific lock in their room door, or just the different dynamics, right? Housing looks very different to folks. So, I mean, I appreciate that it's a case by case, but if there's any examples that you can share about how you're responding to those very unique cases, or buildings where there's the keys downstairs. If you're in a big building, someone can walk right in, and I guess just kind of expanding on that. Again, I appreciate and I understand that it's case by case, but I think this is a really great program. I would love to help fight and join the chair in expanding for funding to expand this. But I think there are so many unique scenarios, especially in a district like mine, in Bushwick and Williamsburg. So I'm just curious how you all kind of respond to that is my last question. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you acknowledging that the case-by-case nature is kind of how the program is operating to be the most responsive that we can to survivors. Internal doors and situations where folks are sharing apartments with other individuals in and out of their family, we can arrange for installations of locks on internal doors through our vendor. So in that context, that's one specific thing I recall you saying. I do think on a case-by-case basis, we're understanding how it plays out. For example, if folks had questions about changing locks on like the front door to an apartment building that serves others, that is going to be a sort of higher, more of a challenge to potentially surmount. But to my colleague Saloni Sethi's point, we're trying to work with all the stakeholders and center the client. So if they have a dynamic with the landlord or management company where they feel comfortable and safe approaching them, the provider will talk to them about what that conversation could look like, and if there can be ways to surmount or pass those potential barriers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Want me to ask my question? Jennifer didn't ask my question, so now I have to ask the question. Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate you. I guess for me, just thinking about the cultural relevance and language access, can you talk to me a little bit about what that looks like? Because often a lot of folks who experience domestic violence sometimes are silenced because of like cultural issues and things like that. So can you talk about what that outreach looks like, and how do we let them know about these programs? And do you have, like when you're doing your recruitment, how many languages do you have them in, and what does that look like?
Sure. So I think, in terms of our outreach, part of the office's outreach efforts are always around just having folks understand that domestic and gender-based violence is an issue, right? Because I think in so many times there is so much that we don't talk about. So making sure that we're out there talking about it is a huge part of getting communities, all types of different communities, to kind of recognize it and identify it and understand that there's supports available. In terms of the language access piece in particular, our providers do offer services in multiple languages for the most part. If they don't have staff that speak those languages, they all have access to telephonic interpretation through LanguageLine. Our materials are also all translated into the top 10 languages, both on our website as well as materials specific to this program about Home Plus. And then the other thing I sort of mentioned is that part of the assessment done with the client also concerns how they want to be contacted, right? So in addition to whether they want phone calls or text, that includes what language they'd like to speak. And so even our providers who are responding have that information on file. So if somebody wants to have response happen in another language, the sort of the personal alarm security company has access to LanguageLine to make sure that they're responding with an interpreter who speaks that language.
And quickly, just to add to that, just to repeat it for emphasis, even the installation instructions with the alarm systems, the vendors would get the information about the language needs of the clients. So that has also been translated into the top 10 city languages and would be included in the package. So the survivor wouldn't even have to ask additionally at that point for that to be given to them.
So this is another question I had that just kind of occurred to me too. So let's say I had this service done once. What happens if I need it again? Because we know sometimes it does not. Sometimes they come back, and sometimes survivors that's just part of the process. So if you like get the service one time, is it like one and done, or could they get it another time? Like, what does that process look like as well?
That's a great question, and I think, along with most of our providers and NGBV understands that this is not a one-and-done process, right? Like trying to address domestic and gender-based violence is an ongoing process, and so for that reason, there's no limit on how many times a survivor can access services.
No, that's really good to hear, because sometimes like these programs, it'll be like, oh, well, you got in, so, we're kind of done. So it's really good to hear that, because sometimes we know it happens and they come back and they rekindle and, it starts up again. So that's really good to hear. And so definitely look to my office as a partner in this as well, and definitely want to make sure that we're getting this information out, because it is something very much needed. And so please let us know how it can be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Councilmember Gennaro have any questions, or do we know? Okay. So I just wanted to ask a few more general questions before we go to public testimony. So the Home Plus program builds on the existing Alternatives to Shelter program, and Home Plus is limited to survivors of gender-based violence. It seems that what gender-based violence means in practical terms is up to the individual non-residential programs providing the service. But for the most part, the services end up being for survivors of intimate partner violence. Do you anticipate a more streamlined definition of GBV, or have you seen issues with the definition in practice?
That's a great question. And I think, I think as we expanded to become the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, it's defining a new space in some ways, right? And kind of identifying like all the things that could potentially fit into that category of gender-based violence. I think as it's at its broadest, it's about any violence that sort of exploits unequal power dynamics between people of any gender. And that's kind of the definition we use. I think our focus is really also on specific forms of gender-based violence, so thinking about sexual violence, domestic violence, trafficking, stalking, all of those family violence as part of that too. So I think we're always working with our providers to make sure that we're being as expansive as possible and reaching as many people as possible.
Thank you. And I know that you mentioned Home Plus will cover the lock repair and change, the window repair and change, the door repair and change, and that panic button alarm system. Is NGBV considering adding any other services, or have you received feedback about other needs from program participants?
Not at this time, I think, in terms of feedback or adding any other services.
And what prompted the expansion of the Home Plus program to begin with? Did any specific factors lead to the elimination of the requirement for active TOPs or OPs, the orders of protection and police response for program participation? And what was NGBV's involvement with the Alternative to Shelter program prior to the redesign of the program and launch of Home Plus? Like, is there staff that overlap, right? Is there staff that worked on ATP and now work for Home Plus?
And so the Alternatives to Shelter program had existed since the mid-90s and was operated by HRA. In 2016, 2017, the city convened a domestic violence task force that was co-chaired by NGBV and the Mayor's Office on Criminal Justice. And the sort of redesign and expansion of Alternatives to Shelter really came from the work of that task force. And that task force engaged other city agencies, stakeholders, our community-based partners, and really that, the thinking behind the expansion was really trying to make sure that as we're thinking about keeping survivors safe in their homes, we're thinking as comprehensively as possible and making sure that we're reaching as many survivors as possible. So the thought to kind of reduce barriers to access and to take away those requirements for documentation around orders of protection or police reports really came from the work of the Domestic Violence Task Force and those recommendations, and that's sort of where the expansion and the transition started.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Councilmember Riley for questions.
Thank you, Chair Caban. Thank you so much. This sounds like an amazing program. I know outreach was spoken about a lot. Is there any evaluation on how we're doing our outreach? Because we do go to a lot of places within our communities, and they never know about these programs that are happening. So is there an evaluation process on how we're doing outreach?
That's, yeah, I mean, we don't currently have an evaluation process on outreach in particular, but I think we'd invite, all of you to, if you have feedback or have people that don't know about the program, we're really, really open to receiving that and open to coming to your communities and talking about this program and all of our other programs and our services in general, because I think it's a huge, in a city like New York, it's an ongoing challenge to make sure that we're getting the information out to as many people as possible.
Of course, and you spoke about trafficking. Can you just explain to me how does this program benefit those who are possibly experiencing that?
Sure. So I think, again, it's applicable to all survivors of domestic and gender-based violence. So even somebody who has been a survivor of trafficking, if they are in a situation where they're now safely housed, but for some reason feel unsafe or need a door lock change or door replacement or window security device to help them feel safer in their homes, they'd be eligible for that program as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I think a common theme as has been from my colleagues around outreach. What's that? Yeah. And so I'm just wondering, can you tell us how much is allocated to outreach, for example? Like, what is the outreach budget on the team? Do you need more resources to be able to have more folks on the outreach team, or money to get materials out? And
we can get back to you on that, but we do have a citywide outreach team that does outreach. I think this is also a relatively new program, so I think as it develops and it becomes more part of like the ecosystem of services that we have, hopefully that'll also help, our outreach efforts and make sure that folks know about this.
Okay. And it does seem like there's a little bit of a gap, and Councilmember Hanif touched on it a little bit, that there seems to be good communication coordination with CBOs, but to kind of catch that person who feels most comfortable in their faith communities, like the connection, coordination, and partnership with faith-based institutions like our mosques, our temples, our churches.
Sure. I mean, I think, we have made lots of efforts to do faith-based specific outreach, and that continues to be sort of a priority for us. We partner with the Mayor's Center for Faith and Community Partnerships on making sure that we're working with them and through them and making, and consistently presenting to them about our work and our programs as well, in the hopes that helps engage faith communities. But again, we're also happy to engage any faith communities directly as well.
Well, thank you. Anybody else have questions? Okay, so I just would like to thank you for your time and your testimony and the information you were able to offer today, and would certainly love to follow up on a couple of the other items that went unanswered. So thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the administration portion of this hearing. We will be moving to public testimony in one moment. I will read the names of the panelists. There's one panelist on Zoom, Michael Pollenberg from Safe Horizon. Again, we will begin in one moment. Thank you. Okay, at this point, we will begin public testimony, beginning and ending with our one registered witness. If there's anyone that we have inadvertently missed in the room or online, We will call your name or check for anyone at the end of this panel. So, Mr. Pollenberg, you may begin your testimony when the sergeant begins the clock. Thank you.
You may begin.
Thank you so much. And good morning. I'm Michael Pollenberg. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at Safe Horizon. I'm happy to be with you this morning. Safe Horizon is the nation's largest nonprofit victim services organization, and we provide a client-centered, trauma-informed response to about 250,000 New Yorkers each year who've experienced violence or abuse. Safe Horizon's mission is to provide support, prevent violence, and promote justice for victims of violence and abuse, their families, and communities. We're eager to share with you our work at Project Safe, which is a program at Safe Horizon where we replace locks and provide services to crime victims. In FY22, Project Safe installed 502 security devices in households across the 5 boroughs. We're looking forward to providing some feedback on Intro 534A. We're grateful that the council is considering this legislation, and I'm just going to provide a little bit of background about Project Safe. We primarily assist survivors of intimate partner or family violence, though we do help victims of other crimes as well. I know that's come up this morning. We receive referrals from a variety of sources, including the city's family justice centers, district attorneys' offices, and our own crime victim assistance program and other Safe Horizon programs. Our lock change program is popular enough to where most survivors are asking for this service up front. But if someone is relaying a narrative wherein their door seems insecure or someone is causing harm has key access, then we might offer the lock change as part of safety planning. And what we've learned over the years is that while Project Safe is a lock change service, the clients we assist often also need additional case management and safety planning. Changing a lock may provide a certain level of security, but there are often other safety needs that warrant our attention. For example, is the abusive party kicking down the door? In these situations, a lock change may not be the best option, and other safety options should be explored. We've also learned that it takes a lot of legwork to manage our vendors. Invoices are not always sent to us on time or at all, which makes it difficult to reconcile our expenses with our funders. Our contract for Project Safe is with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, MOCJ, and it only covers the cost of locks, which means that our staff that do case management and safety planning must be paid through other contracts for victim services. Our limited contract funding has never enabled us to provide lock changes to everyone who requests them. We have to try to prioritize the cases that seem the most dangerous. I mentioned earlier, we applaud Councilmember Hanif for recognizing the need to expand the city's capacity to provide these services for victims of intimate partner and gender-based violence. And we're grateful to all of the council members' staff who have met with us over the past year to better understand the challenges we face in operating Project Safe. We have 3 points of clarification on Intro 534A. One is—
Time has expired.
Oh, you can finish up. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Is there a specific, this came up earlier, is there a specific time frame for community-based organizations to render the lock changing services? Both Project Safe and Cities Home Plus have varying timelines for services depending on volume and availability. If the council's contemplating same-day lock changes, we think sufficient resources will need to be dedicated, as these can be very expensive services. This came up also about eligibility for services for survivors who are still living with a person causing harm. If the bill does not require a police report or an order of protection and the person causing harm refuses to leave the dwelling willingly, this may make it difficult to perform a lock change and be in line with tenant housing laws regarding unlawful eviction. And finally, the bill language only seems to cover lock changing services. Many of our clients are able to get lock changes through other avenues, including by their landlord or Project Safe or the DA's offices or Home Plus. However, there's a lack of services around door and lock repair. Locks and doors are often damaged as a result of the person causing harm. So we just want to make sure there's additional resources for door and lock repair. So thank you. Sorry I went over, and I'm happy to take any questions.
That's quite all right. Okay, I do have just some a short follow-up for you. You know, you talked about some of the barriers to accessing services, but I want to talk about particularly vulnerable communities. Research indicates that individuals living at the margins, including immigrants, you know, queer folks, BIPOC folks, people with disabilities, experience economic abuse, both poverty and domestic violence, at much higher rates than their white cisgender counterparts. And so I'd like to know from you, and from your perspective, how the city can better address these issues with a particular focus on survivors who are deaf or hard of hearing, survivors with other disabilities, survivors with children and pets, survivors of color, queer survivors, criminalized survivors at the intersection of mental health challenges or substance use challenges and things like that, older, younger, veterans, immigrant survivors.
It's a great question. You know, the beauty of New York is that we have such a rich network of service providers in every borough, working with a wide array of populations, including the populations that you listed. And I know that you and NGBB were talking about outreach efforts earlier. I think that there is a way, whether it's through the Family Justice Centers, through the Downstate Coalition for Crime Victims, which I co-chair, or just directly with service providers. I mean, I'm thinking about barrier-free living and thinking about all of these wonderful providers who do such important work with, again, all of the populations you listed, that there is a way to make sure that folks know about this program, that there is an easy path to getting access to lock changes or anything else that they need. So that would be, you know, that would be my hope. That's how that could play out.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for your testimony. That concludes this panel. So at this point, we will ask for anyone we have inadvertently missed. If there is anyone in the room who wishes to testify. We're not seeing anyone in the room and not seeing anyone online. So at this point, this is the end of the public testimony portion of this hearing.
So I know albeit a brief hearing, incredibly informative, and I think that there's like a very clear consensus from myself, colleagues, and from the administration themselves about how important and exciting a program like this and the expansion of a program like this is and transformative it can be for folks struggling around the city. So really looking forward to just continuing to partner on the issue and lean into some of the areas that folks mentioned a lot, specifically around outreach and removing barriers to access. So again, thank you very much for your time, and thank you to my colleagues and council staff. And